Welcome to the CROW LAX TV Larry Bishop Finals Preview Show right here on CROW LAX TV. My name is Keenan, as always, joined by Mohammed Joma. Mo, why don't we start breaking down these games, starting with that first set of three on Friday night?
Yeah, in game one, the Shamrocks take down the Silvertips by a score of 9-5. Shamrocks jump out early, and the Silvertips were never really able to gain their way back into the game. Seth Miller with 4 goals, and the Shamrocks were able to suffocate the game late to take it by 4.
Moving into game two, the 8:15 matchup, Mavericks and Rebels. Mavericks end up winning that game 9-7. It was a game played with incredible pace. That determined Mavericks team came back from a 5-1 deficit to defeat the Rebels, and that would be a sign of things to come in close games for the Mavericks.
And then in game 3, bright and early, 9 a.m., the Shamrocks maybe get caught in a bit of a tough spot. The Blizzard a little bit more used to playing those early games. At 9 a.m. start, the Shamrocks come out a little flat. Blizzard take advantage. The Delaron brothers combined for 5 goals, taking that one 10-6.
We talked to head coach Jason Crook of the Shamrocks right after that game.
Here with Calgary Shamrocks head coach Jason Crook, and we're going to ask right off the bat here, you played a lot of lacrosse throughout your career, junior A, senior B, a lot of success. I want to just pick your brain a little bit about what is it that you take most from your playing days that has helped you as a head coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, a lot of it is the competition and enjoying competing. Lacrosse is a special game. I think it's one of the hardest games to play, and I try to instill that in our teams. Myself as a player, I was never super athletic. I was never good in the fast break, but I always tried to be the smartest guy I could on the floor. So I try to instill that as well, but I also like fast teams because I could never do it, so I like playing fast.
Just before I move on, I want to touch on a little bit. I remember we used to play each other back in the day in junior A, and I remember Southside Arena, you fighting Josh McRobb in the middle of the floor, and from that point on, I was like, I have so much respect for that guy because that is not an easy thing to do. That was not your role, and from then on, I was like, that guy I have utmost respect for.
I appreciate that.
No problem. So you win the Founders in 2019, and you move into more of a GM role. Andrew Smithstad steps in, a guy I have a lot of respect for. So I want to ask you, what sort of led to that decision for you?
Well, I think for me it was an easy decision. Andrew was ready to be a head coach, and I felt that he needed the opportunity to grow and get into that role. And I obviously still had a pretty hands-on role, but at the same time, if I didn't give Andrew an opportunity to head coach, he would have found it somewhere else, which he's going to do anyways. But I just think, Andrew and I think the game a lot the same way, and I think, he's such a character guy. He brings a lot to the table that I don't bring in terms of how he relates to the players, how he relates to teams, and he's just such a special character guy that, he was ready for that opportunity.
That's a great point. Yeah, he's another guy that I have experience with. He's the kind of guy that would blow you up on an exploding box and then pick you up off the floor. It's a class act.
Yep.
So I could totally see that being the case. So for years, your team's been exceptional on special teams. Penalty, kill, power play. You're also a team that practices still twice a week, sometimes 3, and that's rare in the league now. How much time do you normally devote to your special teams in a typical practice?
We try to do it once a week. So typically, we'll do one day where we focus more on 5-on-5, transition, that side of things. And then the other practice will focus on special teams, special situations, time score situation. We're big on that. How we play in situationals like last 5 minutes, when we need a goal, when we're up a goal, all those good things. So we try to have one practice focused on all those special teams and one practice focused on transition and fast break.
Awesome. So I got to ask you, the Blizzard have given you guys some trouble over the last couple of years, 3 in a row, including 2 in the Larry Bishop. What is it that in that matchup that you think presents the biggest challenge for you guys? It gives you the most trouble.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of just their compete and their toughness and their size. They're big, they're extremely athletic, and they've been able to get the better of us, and their goalie's fantastic as well. I think that we've got lots of looks, we've had lots of shots. The earlier game in the regular season this year, we outshot them by about 20, and they still won the game. Like, their goalie's fantastic. So we've got our looks, but we haven't been able to finish, so just haven't been able to get over that hump on them, but hopefully we get another chance.
Yeah, you mentioned size. In the opening ceremonies, I was standing up there. I was like, just as usual, they're a big, large team, a lot of size, a lot of height and width too. They're not just tall.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up by asking you, your biggest key to success in 2024 is what as you progress through the Larry Bishop and try to return to the Founders?
For us, it's our 5th year, guys. We have lots of graduating guys that bring a lot of character. A guy like Aiden Gorst, he just puts his heart on his sleeve and leaves it all out there every game. So we just feed off a guy like that. Pilsner in the net, obviously, he's been a rock for 5 years. So just trying to lean on those 5th years and try to keep him playing as long as we can.
Wicked. Jason Crook, head coach of the Calgary Shamrocks, 1-1 so far in the tournament. They look to improve upon that tonight against the Mountain View Mavericks. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Jason, for those wise words. We always appreciate talking to you. It's always a great interview with you.
And game number 4 was the Mavericks ultimately prevailing over the Silvertips by a score of 9-8. It was a back and forth affair. The Mavericks jumping out early before the Silvertips would answer and take the lead in the third. Despite the massive penalty trouble that the Mavericks would endure, they survive off of a great penalty kill and are able to take the game that was a game of hat tricks. Hat-trick Haven as Luke Hildebrandt, Wyatt Fancy, and Jared Norris all recorded triples.
And after game 4, we were able to catch up with with Silvertips general manager Darren Deitz.
All right, Simon Shaskovsky here with general manager of the Silvertips, Darren Deitz.
Correct.
Darren, how has it been hosting the Larry Bishop so far this year?
It's been great. We've been looking forward to this event for years, really, because COVID kind of pushed the rotation back, and the Alberta teams get a chance to host it. I think it's every 12 years. So we were excited to get the opportunity to finally host it, and it's been going good so far.
Yeah, so obviously with this season, you guys moved from playing in both Cochrane and Airdrie to just playing in Airdrie. What was the decision behind that, or what was the thoughts behind that decision?
Prior to, I think it was up till 27, up to and including 2017, we played out of Cochrane and Airdrie, about 50% home games in each town, and then in 2018 the board made the decision to focus strictly on Cochrane. We kind of reevaluated things over the last couple of years, and partly with this in mind, with hosting Larry Bishop, we wanted to make sure that we had a facility that could accommodate 5 teams with dressing rooms and so forth, and so that was part of it. But we also logistically, for the players that we draft in Calgary and surrounding areas, this was a little bit easier accessibility wise, and as well the minor lacrosse program for the Rocky View Rage Association is growing quite quickly in the more specifically in the Airdrie area. So we're able to tap into the young family market, and the business communities as well. The businesses here are really great to work with, so we've been excited.
And how proud are you of your team so far this year? Obviously a fairly successful season, to say the least.
How proud am I with the season or this weekend?
We'll start with the season.
There's a lot. We're really, as an organization, we're really proud of the organization that we have. We have a great group on our board, led by our president, Bonnie De Groot, and I've been the general manager for a few years, but we've, between the group we have on our board and our coaching staff, we put a lot of time into drafting players that, not just based on their lacrosse skills, but we want good young men, and we really focus on that. And so it's been a very tight group. So from an organization standpoint, we've been really proud with the direction the club's gone. We've progressed every year. This year was a tough year in the Central Division, but we're proud that one of our goals was to get to and win the Central Division, because we didn't want to come in here as the host team, even though we're the host team. We wanted to come in, having won the Central, which we did. Now, as far as this weekend goes, we've left a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak, so far, and we think, it's a very competitive tournament. There's every team has an opportunity to win here. So we feel we're one of those teams, and we will continue to fight for that. So.
Yeah, and you already sort of mentioned it, but how important was it to earn your bid? Because obviously you were hosting. You were going to be here at the end of the year.
Yeah, it was a big goal. We did not, as a team, we did not talk at all about the Larry Bishop until after we won Game 2 against the Mavericks up in Innisfail. The players, the coaching staff, everybody involved, anyone working on Larry Bishop behind the scenes did their work, but from a team perspective, we had one focus at the time, and that was first of all clinching first in the regular season, so we get home or the bye week, and then we really wanted to win the Central Division in the playoffs, which was a big success for us. So we were quite happy. That's when we then turned the page, celebrated that day, but then it was back to work right away to get ready for this weekend.
Well, thanks so much for doing this again, Darren.
Yeah. So,
You're watching CROW LAX TV.
Awesome, and thank you, Darren, so much for letting us speak with you and letting us know a bit more behind the scenes of the Silvertips.
And then we roll into Game 5, where it was the Rebels getting a much-needed win over the Blizzard by a score of 12-8. These teams, they couldn't separate from one another all game long. There was a little bit of everything in this game. 5-on-5, power play, transition looks, both teams going, I think I even on the broadcast described it as a boxing match, teams going toe-to-toe. It was the Jackson Coat show. Ultimately, he had 5 goals and 6 assists. The Rebels would take it 12-8.
And after that game, we were able to catch up with not only head coach Darren Beret of the Rebels, but also general manager Dave McGarva.
Here with Rebels head coach Darren Beret and GM Dave McGarva. Now I want to open up by asking, you guys are a bit of an innovator when it comes to the draft. I want you to tell people sort of what your general philosophy is on approaching the draft and how you just sort of deal with the draft on a yearly basis.
We essentially it's kind of a group effort. There's usually 5 or 6 of us that kind of scout during the year. The summer before, the winter, we kind of make a draft board, mock drafts, move guys up and down wherever we see fit. Sometimes it's what we need in our lineup, and we just rank guys that way, essentially. We do a lot of interviews, kind of get to know their personalities a little bit, see what kind of guys we're drafting. And then we definitely look for, sometimes it's character over skill, because you want the right guys in our dressing room, and just to make sure that there's no cancers in the room, and that's essentially it.
Anything to add, Dave?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that the staff work really hard with their draft. We have Justin Smith, who's a dedicated scout. He goes out and watches all the Tier 2, all the midget games. So we kind of know what we're doing. To Darren's point, I think at this point in our evolution, we've figured out what a Rebel is and what it is to be successful with our program.
Yeah, and I think that's key, and establish sort of an identity. And I think that you guys would be the first to say, that was a big part of your being the Warriors. You guys played to your identity. You guys were who you were and who you said you were all season long, and you showed it on the floor. So I think that's a big reason why you guys are here in Airdrie. So that's a good lead into this next question. What are the attributes that you would attribute to being a Rebel? 2 or 3 words or concepts that you would put at the top of your list that you would characterize a Rebel as being?
Character, hardworking, and then you've said it kind of the last couple of weeks, Swiss Army. I like two-way players, so I like hard-nosed, physical players that can play both sides of the ball. So
yeah, and I mean, since the inception of the Rebels, we have a lot of great local talent, but we always have to bring kids in from outside. So that whole idea of convincing a kid from Thorsby, a kid from Leduc, that he should take that drive to Fort Saskatchewan. We've got 2 kids from Lloydminster that drive back and forth every day. We've had to build a program that appeals enough to them that they're willing to drive that distance.
So I have to ask, you guys slay the Warrior Beast this year after 2022 and 2023. What would you say is the biggest difference in this year's version of the Rebels as opposed to maybe the last 2 or 3 years?
Well, I don't know. I don't think we were as far away from the Warriors as
no, you weren't.
Makes it, I mean, even the last 3 years. 2 years ago, yes, we were a 10-10 team. We had a good upset in the first round, and the Warriors were a far better team. Last year, we took them to Game 3, and I think we had them a little nervous, and they ended up as national champions. We've had a pretty solid program. So others might have been surprised that we beat them. We weren't surprised.
Yeah, no, I know. I fully agree. You guys were really close last year. I just think sometimes getting over that actual hurdle of winning, I think is very tough sometimes for a lot of teams to do, and then for you guys to overcome that and do that this year, I think was of note.
And on that point, we did kind of focus our whole year, like we knew we were going to have to go through the Warriors, so it's very much we're watching what they're doing, they're watching what we're doing, and so a lot of scouting, a lot of video. So that essentially was a lot more preparation, because they were very much the same type of team as they were last year. There was not much difference. The guys they added were the guys essentially to fill the guys they lost last year, and so it was this very similar looking team. It was predictable in some ways, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so huge win tonight against the Blizzard. It was like a make or break game for you guys in a lot of ways. Now it sort of creates a 4-team race to get into the final on Monday. What would you say was the biggest key for your victory tonight?
I guess resiliency. I think after our first game, it kind of shook them a little bit. And even this game, it was back and forth till the last 10 minutes, and we finally figured out how to stop them and finally put a couple balls in the net and took a couple of real nice lucky shots as well. So a little bit of ball luck, and I think just everyone just buying in and working hard and supporting each other.
Yeah, and I just echo what Darren said. The piece that I really like to see today was we were scoring in transition, and when we're playing well, we're scoring in transition.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it on the head. I think these teams are so close that getting a couple of goals that maybe wouldn't have gone in last night is huge. And then you also nailed it with the transition. I had said that to myself watching the game. Like, I think it was Bajma who scored that opening goal in the third period. Huge goal for you guys, gets the lead, and you've got 19 minutes to go, and it's sort of I saw it lift your bench up a little bit. I thought it made a huge difference. So next up, I want to ask you, what was your overarching message to the team? It was your first trip to the Larry Bishop since 2019, so most of these kids wouldn't have been here before. COVID, interrupted it for a couple of years. What did you sort of tell the team as you prepared over the week?
Actually, none of them have been here before, so it was actually kind of cool little moment yesterday where it was the first time they've been in provincials. But it's just a game, right? It's just a tournament. Just take every day as the same as every other game we take. Like, obviously, you're not done until you're done. So whatever happens, but just don't give up, don't quit. Just be the same team we've always been, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, same for me. The only thing I've been telling the boys is this is like no other lacrosse experience you've had before unless you've been here. 5 games, 4 days. It's pretty intense physically and mentally, and just to stick with it, have fun, enjoy this.
Yeah, and I think that's a really underrated or understated point or part of lacrosse or sports in general is having that mental strength, right? Guys that haven't been here before, it can be very nerve-wracking as well. I think you have a lot of guys on the team that handled it really well, and I think that was a big part in your win here tonight. So we're going to wrap up this interview by asking each of you just 2 or 3 sentences on what a trip to the Founders would mean if you guys were fortunate enough to come out of Airdrie with a title.
First, you've been waiting a long time, so
a lot of work to do. Getting things organized.
Yeah.
No, I mean everything. We started this program 9 years ago. We, junior sports is in a cycle. Peak of our cycle, we lost to COVID. So we're back to where we're headed. We're not at our peak yet, but we're headed there. And it'd mean everything. That's the way we do this.
Yeah, it's why you play, and for me, it's about the kids, players, right? So I've gotten to play in one, lucky enough to play in one, and it was a great experience. I learned a lot. You get to play a lot of different teams, so getting there would be awesome. Not just for our team success, but the individual player-wise, like just the exposure you get going to play in Ontario, playing different teams, especially playing junior B here and having the 2 years COVID. Like, they're not exposed to a lot of different lacrosse, and that would be an unreal experience for them. But obviously, it's a long ways away, so I haven't really thought about that far yet.
It's totally fair. Well, there you have it. The head coach of the Fort Saskatchewan Rebels, Darren Bray, and GM Dave McGarva. The Rebels sit at 1-1. currently in the tournament, and they'll look to improve upon that tomorrow as we narrow it down to the final two for Monday's gold medal game.
So thank you to Dave and Darren. Always appreciate talking to you guys.
Let's move over to Game 6, where it was the Mavericks with a huge win over the Shamrocks. 8-7, Alex Swan, a brick wall in the net, as he has been throughout this tournament, especially early, as the Shamrocks had a number of power plays in the first period, unable to cash, only up 1-0 after the first, and it allowed the Mavericks to gain their footing. They really took off from there, ended up winning the game, and it was Seth Miller for the Shamrocks who had a hat trick, while Everett Muratori also with a hat trick, and he was stellar all game long with clears, getting the ball up the floor, and really being a jack of all trades for the Mavericks. Then in Game 7, the Blizzard would take it 11-7 in yet another early morning game. Something that maybe you could say favors them, as they're used to playing in that slot. And again, the Delarons light the world on fire. They combined for 6 goals. Chase Penner with a hat trick of his own in the losing cause.
And following Game 7, we were able to catch up with the Silvertips president, Bonnie De Groot, who talked all about hosting the Larry Bishop. My name is Keenan here on CROW LAX TV. I'm with the president of the Rocky View Silvertips, Bonnie De Groot. Thank you for joining me, Bonnie.
Thank you for
Greatly
having me.
appreciate it. So let's start at the beginning. How did this all come together for the Silvertips to host the Larry Bishop Memorial Cup?
So my understanding is every team in the RMLL in Alberta gets a chance to host the Larry Bishop. So we see it once every 12 years, and this is our year to host. Yeah.
Awesome. So I know you guys moved to Genesis Place just before the start of the playoffs here, and then subsequently into the Larry Bishop. I know that you also moved to Airdrie full-time this season. Were you always eyeing like a new beautiful arena like Genesis Place to host the Larry Bishop?
We were. We knew that Plainsman wouldn't be big enough to host the amount of fans and the change rooms that we needed for all of the teams. And the city of Airdrie was kind enough to take the ice sheet out and put a dry pad in for us, just specifically for the Larry Bishop.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So running a tournament like this is definitely no simple feat. I've seen countless volunteers all over this building. I know it's a big question, but what does it take to put together such a big and successful tournament like this from your level?
You know what? It takes a team. It takes a team. And the team that I have with the Silvertips on the board, they've been fantastic. Every single one of them, they've just said, you know what, Bonnie, run with it. So, but without the parents and without the board, none of this would be happening.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Bonnie, so much. I appreciate your time here. Bonnie De Groot, president of the Rocky View Silvertips. And thank you, Bonnie, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule running this tournament to have a couple minutes to chat with us.
In what was probably the game of the tournament, at least to date, game number 8, Rebels take down the Shamrocks in overtime 11-10. As you saw a lot in this tournament, one team would get out to a lead. In this case, it was the Rebels before the Shamrocks stormed back and took the lead in the third and were up 8-7 late in the game, only seconds left. They took a timeout and they actually took goaltender Pilsner out because they had to win the game by at least 5 goals for tiebreaker purposes if they wanted to make the final. Smart coaching decision. He let everybody know what the situation was. You could see it on the bench from the stands. But in the end, the Rebels able to come out with the win. Jackson Cohut, I believe, with the winning goal.
And following that game, we were able to catch up with head coach of the Mountain View Mavericks, Trey Christensen, who was definitely in game time mode as he was about to coach one of the biggest games of this tournament. Well, my name is Keenan here with CROW LAX TV. I'm here with Trey Christensen, head coach of the Mountain View Mavericks. Now, Trey, yourselves and Red Deer have your own draft with all the guys from Central Alberta. I know some of the viewers want to know, how many towns do you have players from in the Central Alberta area?
So it'd be about 6 towns, a lot of rural influence through and through. It's a pretty wide demographic, so we take pride in that. It's not just one community, it's a whole area, right? So it's everywhere.
Love to hear that. I do want to touch on one of your players, Everett Muratori, real quick. He came to the Mavs partway through the season. He's been one of the most talked about names, I know, upstairs in the broadcast booth during this tournament. What's the story behind him and just the presence that he brings on the floor?
Great player, great work ethic. We're excited to see what he can do tonight.
Awesome, love to hear that. You yourself have been a mainstay in this tournament for 5 of the last 6, mostly with the Red Deer Rampage. What do you think the experience in this tournament provides the guys that are on this team that were only in Tier 3 7 calendar years ago?
Yeah, we do what we can. At the end of the day, it's on the guys, though, and all the props to them, but the job's not done yet. We got a big game tonight.
Absolutely. And you've been able to prove a lot of people wrong in this tournament. I mean, myself included from early season, I would say. But you've made the Central Division one of the most dangerous divisions to play in all season long. What do you contribute that success to this season with the Mavs team that is still relatively new to this division?
All grit, especially being as young as we are. It's just all will, no skill. Just push through. Got to have that mental toughness, especially in tournaments like this. It's not always the best team. It's the team that wants it the most.
It's definitely a grueling schedule coming in for your first time and playing 4 games in 72 hours, basically. Trey Christensen, head coach of the Mountain View Mavericks. And thank you, Trey, for taking some time to speak with me. I know you were totally in game time mode and totally understandable just before you were about to face the Blizz.
And also, as Keenan was wrapping up that interview, was it also able to talk to head coach of the Winnipeg Blizzard, Jared Wood?
All right. So here with the Blizzard head coach, I want to ask you, so starting off, like you guys run a very buttoned up professional organization. Do you think that it is a benefit to you guys to have younger coaches on your coaching staff that sort of are former players and are able to relate to the players really well, having just played on the team, not so long ago?
Yeah, 100%. Maybe I'm biased as a young coach, but I think it's super important to have guys coaching at this level that have played at this level or higher. And then also having former players that played on the Blizz in the past bring that team culture forward. I think those two benefits far outweigh the benefits of having maybe an older, experienced, more adult voice in the room, you could call it. So yeah, I think that does benefit us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could tell, like, you guys in the warm-up, right before the second warm-up, you guys were all ripping the ball around. I was like, yeah, these guys, I remember your guys' names in general because I used to coach with the CROW.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, you know what, I think that does make a big difference, being able to relate to the players, having just been there and done that. And I think, like, in the room, you make a good point, right? Your voices, I think, echo a little bit more because you've been through it, right? You know exactly what they've been going through. So the Blizzard have attended every Larry Bishop since its inception, other than the very first one. So 2014 was the first year. Do you think that that's a big advantage for you guys coming into this tournament, knowing that you're playing, a lot of games in a short amount of time, some awkward time slots, 9 a.m.? That's the other part of the question I would say is, do you think that builds mental toughness, like having to play those games? No other team has to play 2 9 a.m. games in the tournament.
Or 2 double headers.
Yeah.
I would say the first part of the question, having been here before, experience definitely helps, right? Helps you stay the course in tight games, or when you drop one, that experience definitely is big, right? And I think anyone would agree. And then, our schedule does benefit us. We are experienced in playing the double headers. It's just us and the SWAT at this point that I believe that do the double headers throughout the season. And so, for sure, it helps. But, I mean, when you're playing your second game of the day against a team that's playing their first, you're at an obvious disadvantage.
And I would say, I think also doing that in the regular season at times too, I think would probably prepare you as well, right, for that. And that's something that I have a lot of admiration for your organization because I can't imagine, like, I never played at maybe like Bantam, we played 9 a.m. games, but the fact that not only are you doing that, but you're playing a second game, that's pretty impressive. So I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for that.
Appreciate that.
So the next thing I want to ask you is, most people listening or watching will be from Alberta, so they won't be really familiar with your program. Do you guys draw from the entire province? And if so, where are sort of your biggest centers that you draw from? Obviously, Winnipeg would be number one, but are there certain areas within Manitoba that you get a lot of players from?
Definitely primarily Winnipeg, the bulk. I don't believe we have anyone on the team this year from outside of Winnipeg more than like a half hour. So a couple surrounding communities like Oakbank and Stonewall. In the past, we've had guys as far as Thompson, which is about 8 hours north of Winnipeg. We've had guys from the Saugeen Reserve, which is a couple hours north of Winnipeg. So there have been players here and there, but primarily from Winnipeg, because as it stands right now, our minor lacrosse association it's got to be like 85-90% Winnipeg teams. There are a few rural-based teams, but especially with the pandemic and stuff, numbers took a hit there, and it's starting to build back in the right direction. So there's a couple more rural teams, but primarily Winnipeg.
Okay, and then just like a little additional piece to that is, I know in the past Field has been a little bit bigger than Box in Manitoba. Is that still the case, or is Box sort of surpassed Field?
So Field is bigger by the numbers because Field is ran through high school. So you get a lot of football, hockey players, and the lot joining up and playing lacrosse for the first time in high school. As far as talent, though, the biggest talent's definitely coming from the Box kids that have come all the way up. I mean, we have had players in the past, and we have at least one player this year who never played Box prior to trying out for our team, but it is a lot rarer.
And so I want to go and ask you, give you a chance to talk about your players a little bit. Who is sort of your leadership group within that, aside from coaches, within that room? Do you have any fifth-year players that sort of lead by example, or vocally? Just talk a little bit about your players and a couple guys you want to call out a little bit.
For sure. So our leadership group that wears the letters, Will Angus, Evan Fielding, and Corbin Wiley, are definitely the spearhead of our leadership group. But other guys like Carter Ullett, Tyrell Gray, Reese White are fifth-year guys who are in their last few games of the season here before Founders. Definitely have taken on a larger leadership role. We always tell the guys, especially guys coming back from college and stuff too, that are older, letting them know that just because you don't wear a letter doesn't mean that you can't be a leader on this team. And some of the guys, like my fifth years, have definitely embraced that, which is awesome to see. As far as shouting out individual players, I mean, our entire defensive core has really showed up and been big for us this year. 3 years ago we had 20 or 21 rookies on the team coming out of the pandemic, and so these guys that have been with us for the last 3 years have grown together, battled together, and so a super special group all around. I wouldn't call out, I guess, really anyone else because we're a real team unit.
Yeah, and I think that was probably maybe the biggest reason why you guys were able to take down the Kings team with top. It was pretty top heavy, and you're a very well balanced team, guys that can get it done on both ends of the floor. I think Angus is a guy that I've noticed the last couple of years that has made a huge difference to your team. So last question, because I know you have a big game coming up here. So you're entering the sort of the last little portion of this tournament. You're right in the mix. You have a chance to make it to the final here. What would you sort of take maybe from previous years as you kind of go into the final portion of this tournament? And is this sort of the most competitive and highest level that you've seen at this tournament in any of the years that you would have been here as a player or as a coach?
Yeah, definitely. This is the most competitive I've seen this tournament in a long time. Probably since back, even 2016, 2017 when we won it the first couple times. I would say from what I remember, anyways, when we won it back in 2016, it being very competitive. There wasn't really any shoe-ins, or there wasn't any teams that made the tournament that weren't going to have a crack back then. Even the Shamrocks, I think, hosted that year. They went 20-0, and they finished bottom of the pack. And so that's how competitive that weekend was. Definitely in recent years, a couple weaker teams talent-wise in it. And so, yeah, definitely I'd say this year when you get the 4 champs and a runner-up that was right there with all these teams, definitely extremely competitive. Makes for exciting lacrosse, even though it makes it harder for us. What do we got to do to get it done in the remainder here? We just got to come out and play our style of ball and make these guys play at our pace and not the other way around, because obviously the Mavericks are good at doing that.
There you have it. I want to thank the entire Blizzard organization for stepping into this tournament. I know there's a lot of people that, it's Alberta and Manitoba. They're from a different province, but you guys handle yourself with class, and I wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Jared for talking to us. It was really close to game time, class act. Thank you to the Blizzard organization.
And speaking of Game 9, that game the Blizzard would end up taking 4-3 over the Mavericks. Great goaltending and fast breaks, as they were the theme shown all throughout that matchup. And both Swan and Isaby were absolutely stellar through that game. The Blizzard did play more of a Mavericks-style game. Plenty of quick breaks up the floor. For the time being, the Blizzard were in jeopardy of losing out on that tiebreaker to make the final, because they needed to win by 3 and not need a Rebel loss.
So that took us to game number 10, where the Rebels were in position to grab a spot in the final. But unfortunately, it was the Silvertips who took a hold of the opportunity already out. They were playing for pride, and in their hometown, they stood up and showed out. They were led by Jared Norris, who went off for 5 goals in the game. The Rebels just looked a little bit disjointed, a little bit uneasy on offense, weren't moving the ball like they typically do, and star young goaltender Jacob McGilvery had a bit of a tough game, and the Rebels would go down to the Silvertips. That meant that the final of the 2024 Larry Bishop would be the Mountain View Mavericks and the Winnipeg Blizzard. And with that, let's start to talk about what we have in store here for the final of the 2024 Larry Bishop Memorial. The winner already being determined in terms of who's going to the Founders. The Mountain View Mavericks are off to Hamilton, as they will represent Alberta, and full marks to this organization. You know, they came from Tier 3 not too long ago, and in the span of a few years in the Tier 1 circuit, they not only make the Larry Bishop, but they also book a spot in the Founders Cup, a team built on determination, grit, heart, and just a little bit of everything. You know, they've got really strong goaltending, they've got guys that can play the two-way game, they've got a solid defense, and they get timely scoring, and that can't be, you know, emphasized enough. They're going to be difficult for whoever they face in the Founders, but for right now, we need to talk about what's in store in this final. Keenan, Blizzard and Mavericks, what do you think happens here?
Now, it's hard to say, considering we just had that 4-3 game earlier today with the Blizzard coming out on top. If the Blizzard can play that Maverick style again and play the way that, you know, almost matching the way that the Mavericks play. We saw it when the Mavericks played the Rebels. The Mavericks had times where I don't think they expected that out of the Rebels, and they struggled at those times. But that being said, they were able to find their way past it, and they were able to come out on top. So I think the Mavericks have a good shot at beating the Blizz, as long as they understand that they need to contort the way that they're playing to be something that isn't what they're used to. Is they need to play a different style of game that might almost shock the Blizzard into being down by 3, 4, 5 goals.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that both of these organizations, in a way, even though you might not think of the Mavericks as having a ton of experience, they are led by head coach Trey Christensen, who's been in this spot many times before. He's led Red Deer to countless Larry Bishops, and he is also he's gotten a silver medal at the Founders 2017 when they lost to Orangeville in Saskatoon. So the Mavericks do have a little bit of been there, done that, even though they are a newer franchise making their first appearance in this kind of spot. The Blizzard, meanwhile, plenty of that. They win in 2016 over the Chill. This is their 5th Larry Bishop final. And I know I talked to Jared about it in the interview. He's a guy with so much experience as a player, as does his staff. All 3 of those guys playing on the Blizzard at some point or another. Most of them, if not all of them, playing together. So he's going to have that on their side as well. He's going to be able to tell those guys, you know, what it's like to play in this game and what to expect. They'll have those guys prepared as well. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see 2 teams that are very well coached with excellent goaltending, go head to head, and it's going to be a great game. I think maybe one advantage the Blizzard have is they have a size advantage. Some of their offensive guys have some really width to them, like a lot of size, not just height, but they're solid guys. And the Mavericks, you know, maybe a little bit better defensively at times, just in terms of their ability to double the ball and create turnovers.
And a bit faster, too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just talking from a general obviously both teams can do a little bit of everything, and they don't have too many weaknesses. So it's honestly hard to pick a winner between these two teams. They're two very deserving teams, I think. Right? They've worked for everything they've got, and they haven't been handed everything. Think about all the games that the Blizzard have had to play this year. 2 games in a day when they go on road trips. Early games, they just played 2 9 a.m. games in this tournament. As a player, as an ex-player myself, that's so hard to do. I can't stress that enough. I don't think people understand what that's like. So that's one thing. Then the Mavericks, toughest division all year in the league, and they rise to the top. You know, they started out, a little bit shaky, not really all that shaky, but they definitely hit their stride as the season went along. They have a unique style of game.
Very.
That gives teams problems.
It's a style of game that keeps the scoring low, but the intensity high. And teams, I don't think, when they play the Mavericks, are expecting that because they're used to fast-paced, high-scoring games.
Yeah.
Whereas the Mavericks like to grind out their games.
Yeah, and look at their box scores. I mean, I've been talking about this for a while. You look at their box scores, they always have, almost always, and not always, but almost always, have a huge period where they score 5-6 goals, and they sort of ride that. You saw it third period against the Rebels. You saw it second period against the Shamrocks. Today they take the loss 4-3, but
they weren't able to solve the Blizzard.
Yeah, Silvertips, they had, I think it was their first against the Silvertips. So there's not even like one period you can point to, but they always have that period where they kind of take off. So I think that's something to watch for. They're a team that when they smell blood, I think that they go after it very well. So I think this is a tale of two teams that play different styles, although we just talked about how the Blizzard kind of played the Maverick style today and won, so that shows you that they're versatile. But yeah, we'll see. I think that it's going to be a tight game. I think if you're setting the line, this is like a 1 or 2 goal spread.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the Larry Bishop Finals pregame show. We've got the actual game for you coming up right away, right here on CROW LAX TV.